In May of 1940, the entire fighting force of the British Army stood with its back to the sea. Not retreating in good order, not executing a tactical withdrawal, running. 338,000 men, the largest and most experienced army Britain had ever deployed to continental Europe, were pressed onto a 9-mile strip of beach in northern France, with German armor closing from 3 sides and the English Channel at their backs. There were no warships waiting to save them. There was no plan. There was only the sand, the smoke, and the sea. And then, appearing out of the morning haze, came the most improbable rescue fleet in the history of warfare. To understand how the proudest army in the world ended up stranded on a French beach, you have to go back to September 1939, when Britain and France declared war on Germany following the Nazi invasion of Poland. For months, the conflict settled into an uneasy stillness along the Franco-German border. Journalists called it the phony war. Soldiers called it boredom. But on the 10th of May, 1940, everything changed in a single morning. Adolf Hitler unleashed Fallgelb, Case Yellow, a masterpiece of armored aggression unlike anything the world had ever seen. While Allied commanders expected the main German thrust to come through Belgium, General Erich von Manstein had engineered something far more audacious. 7 armored divisions poured through the Ardennes forest, a region the French had confidently declared impassable to tanks. They were catastrophically wrong. Within days, German panzer columns had crossed the Meuse River, broken through the French lines, and were driving hard for the English Channel coast. The Allied armies in the north were not simply outfought, they were outthought. By the 20th of May, the Germans had reached the coast. The trap was closed. The man who inherited this catastrophe was a general who had only just arrived. Lord Gort, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, was a decorated soldier of the First World War, a Victoria Cross recipient, brave and steadfast by reputation. But bravery counted for little when your flanks had collapsed and your communications had disintegrated. On the 25th of May, Gort made the most consequential decision of the entire campaign. Against the direct orders of his French allies, he turned 2 divisions away from a planned counterattack and used them to plug a gap in the line near Dunkirk, a small port town on the northern coast of France. It was an act of insubordination that may have saved Western civilization. Back in London, a new Prime Minister was watching. Winston Churchill had taken office only 15 days earlier, on the 10th of May, the same morning the German assault began. He had inherited a government in shock, a military in retreat, and a cabinet that included men like Lord Halifax, who were already murmuring quietly about a negotiated peace with Hitler. Churchill knew that if the BEF was lost on those beaches, if 300,000 trained soldiers were killed or captured, Britain would have no army left to defend itself. No army meant no bargaining position. No bargaining position meant capitulation. On the 26th of May, Churchill authorized Operation Dynamo. The question was not whether they could save the army. The question was whether they could save enough of it to matter. Vice Admiral Bertram Ramsay coordinated the operation from a room tunneled into the white chalk cliffs beneath Dover Castle, his staff working in shifts around a single telephone exchange. The initial estimate, compiled by officers who had never expected to need it, was grimly cautious. Perhaps 45,000 men could be lifted from the beaches before the Germans closed the pocket entirely. The problem was the beaches themselves. Dunkirk's long, shallow shore meant that even destroyers could not get close enough to load men directly. Soldiers would wade into the water to their chests, to their armpits, and still not reach the ships. Men were drowning in the attempt. Then someone, history does not record exactly who, had the idea that would change everything. Small boats, hundreds of them, shallow drafted civilian vessels that could nose right up to the waterline and ferry men out to the waiting warships. On the 14th of May, weeks before Dynamo began, the BBC had broadcast a request for owners of self-propelled pleasure craft to register their vessels. Nobody had explained exactly why. Now the Admiralty knew. The call went out, the boats began to move, and from harbours and rivers and private moorings all across southern England, something extraordinary started to happen. They came from everywhere. A paddle steamer called the Medway Queen that had spent its days ferrying tourists. A Dunkirk fishing boat named Thames, just 15 feet long, the smallest vessel in the entire flotilla. A pleasure cruiser called Sundowner, skippered by a 63-year-old retired naval commander named Charles Lightoller, the most senior survivor of the Titanic, who took his son and a Sea Scout boy as crew and brought home 130 men. The beaches were a vision from hell. Columns of soldiers stood in the water in lines that stretched hundreds of meters into the sea, motionless, waiting. German aircraft swept in low, machine gunning the lines. Men fell. Other men stepped forward to close the gaps. The oil tanks of Dunkirk burned. A column of black smoke rose 7 miles into the sky, visible from the English coast. Bombs fell on the mole, the Long Harbour Pier, and on the ships tied alongside it. A destroyer called HMS Grenade was hit and capsized with men still aboard. Below the waves, the bodies of horses, vehicles, and men littered the seabed along the evacuation route. Above the waves, the little ships kept coming. Through smoke and fire and the shriek of dive bombers, they came back. One fishing smack, the Renown, made 7 crossings in 4 days. Her captain was 55 years old. He had never sailed at night in open water. He learned during those 4 days. Soldiers wept when they saw those boats. Hardened men who had not cried under artillery fire broke down when a Thames River cruiser nosed up through the surf toward them. On the 29th of May, the Germans sent everything they had. The Luftwaffe flew over 700 sorties. Bombs fell so thick and close that the sea itself seemed to leap upward. 3 destroyers were sunk in a single afternoon. The harbour mole shook with each impact. Men in the water clung to debris and prayed. Admiral Ramsay, in his chalk room beneath Dover, received reports that made the math look impossible. The losses in ships were accelerating faster than the rate of evacuation. At this rate, they would run out of vessels before they ran out of men. And then, on the ground outside Dunkirk, something happened that the historians still argue about. The German tanks stopped. Hitler's halt order, issued on the 24th of May and only partially lifted, had kept the panzer divisions back from delivering the killing blow. The reasons remained disputed. Perhaps Goering had promised the Luftwaffe alone could finish the job. Perhaps Hitler feared a trap. Perhaps the terrain around the canals gave him pause. Whatever the reason, for 2 critical days, the armor waited. The RAF, outnumbered and fighting at the edge of their range, threw themselves at the German air fleets. Spitfires and Hurricanes clawed at the bombers. Pilots flew until they could not lift their arms to pull the stick. Several crash-landed on the beach itself, their fuel utterly spent, and joined the evacuation queues on foot. On the 4th of June, 1940, Operation Dynamo ended. 338,226 men had been brought home, not 45,000, not a remnant, an army. Churchill addressed the House of Commons that afternoon with words that became immortal. "We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall never surrender." The equipment was gone. 84,000 vehicles, 500,000 tons of supplies, 1,100 artillery pieces, all abandoned in the sand. Britain had an army but no weapons. France would fall within 2 weeks, and Churchill knew it. But the men were home. Without those 300,000 soldiers, there was no Battle of Britain, no North Africa, no D-Day. Without Dunkirk, Hitler faces no credible land threat in the West, no pressure on two fronts, potentially no Allied liberation of Europe at all. The arithmetic of history turns on 9 miles of French beach and the answer that came back across the channel in fishing boats. Dunkirk was not a victory. Churchill himself said so, standing in the Commons on that June afternoon. But it proved something more durable than victory, that a free people, given a desperate enough reason, will sail into a burning sea on anything that floats. The miracle at Dunkirk was not performed by generals or governments. It was performed by fishermen who didn't ask permission. If you found this story remarkable, subscribe. We uncover forgotten history every week.